We had a couple of questions that are basically about Indiana. So Sean asked one, and then Ohio Divided asked another one. And so you see them on the screen. If you can't see them on the screen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the first one, and then Bradley, I'll just have you throw this back up in a second. I'll read the second one. So the first one from Sean in Rochester, New York. He said, you said Cinderellas would never happen in college football. Well, isn't Indiana somewhat of a Cinderella? They've got 8 4- or 5-star players. There's a huge talent deficit, and they still throttled Alabama and Oregon. Cinderellas have great coaching, and they play harder than their opponents. Yeah, I see where you're going with that. I absolutely said that the college football playoff expanding completely eliminated the chances we would ever have at seeing a Cinderella run. Indiana's not a Cinderella, at least as I define it. Now, you may define Cinderella differently. I define a Cinderella as a have-not in college football making a run to play for or win a national championship. So Indiana is not a have-not. Indiana is a has-not. There is no way that a Big Ten or an SEC school could ever be classified as a Cinderella to me. I understand the history of the sport has seen Indiana be terrible in football forever. If you are affiliated with the Big Ten or the SEC, you are not a have-not. You just aren't. Everything financially about the table of college football is tilted in your favor. And it has been more so recently than ever before. So there will never be a Cinderella story from the Big Ten or the SEC. You could argue from the Power Four, but especially from the Big Ten or the SEC. Now, that's not to say I'm shortchanging Indiana. Indiana may be the best story in college football I've seen in several years, maybe in my life, although I don't like to say that as the story is still being written. Got all the respect and admiration in the world for what they're doing. I don't classify it as a Cinderella story. Here's what the Cinderella story would be. The Cinderella story would have been had Sig stayed at JMU and took JMU on this run. That would be the Cinderella story. At Indiana, it's just an incredible story. It's an unfathomable story. It's not a Cinderella story. The Cinderella story is the have-not making the run. Give you a little bit of an example here. Fernando Mendoza just won the Heisman. Indiana's not where they are right now without Fernando Mendoza, right? They spent reportedly about $2.5 million on Mendoza, which just means they got him on the cheap relative to the quarterback market right now. But let's say $2.5 million. That alone is a higher price tag than the entire payroll of all the G5 teams. So that's not a Cinderella story. It is a superb job of evaluating talent and acquiring the talent and then plugging them into an incredible system. And you don't need to sell me on the efficiency and the execution level and all the coaching and the buy-in. All that stuff is A+ in Indiana. That's different than it being a Cinderella story. All right, so that's the Cinderella part of it. Now, Bradley, throw the questions back up because there was another question about recruiting rankings that everyone thinks Indiana has shot a hole in. Ohio State Divided hit me up and said, is high school recruiting dead? Not at all. It's just evolved. It's just evolved. All these folks like to compare the NFL to college football, which I hate. But let me use their arguments against them. Not you per se, but let me use their arguments against them. Would you ever hear NFL fans watch a team acquire big-time free agent talents and those free agent talents lead a team to the Super Bowl and say, well, I guess the draft is dead? No, it'd be stupid. The draft is never dead. Recruiting's never dead. And I don't really even care in what context you're asking the question. It's not dead. The reason I say that is there are a couple of different contexts in which people are talking about high school recruiting right now in the wake of Indiana making this run they've made. The first is, well, high school recruiting's dead because now you just need to portal your team in, which is a fallacy. I think most people who understand roster construction know that. There is another group of people out there saying recruiting rankings are dead in a sense that recruiting rankings are flawed. Because if recruiting rankings were accurate, then these former 3-stars wouldn't be like torching their way through these rosters littered with 4- and 5-star talent. And I'm looking at that, and I assume what you're saying is you're saying that recruiting rankings aren't the end-all, be-all. But here's the thing. No one ever said they were. I'll make my argument here. I can't speak for anyone else. What I've always thought about recruiting rankings in a 50,000-foot perspective is that they are the greatest tool at predictive success in college football. They have been for a long time. Not perfect, but the best tool we have. And anyone who disagrees with that, I would encourage you to hit rewind 30 seconds and listen to what I actually said, because sometimes I think when people disagree with that, they heard what you didn't say. So hear what I did say. And then if you still disagree, I want you to tell me, what better tool is there for predictive college football success than high school recruiting rankings? Team rankings. I don't think you have one. You can anecdotally pull me examples of 2-stars that have gone on to be first-round draft picks. You can anecdotally pull me examples of 5-stars that ended up never doing anything. But see, I never denied that those exist. I said it's an imperfect system that still remains the best predictor of success. With that in mind, every rule in life, at least every rule in sports, has an exception to it. You're looking at a glaring exception in Indiana. But guys, I don't even know if it's this massive exception to the rule that everyone's making it out to be. Like, everyone keeps putting these graphics up about how many former 4- and 5-star recruits they have versus your Oregons or your Alabamas, and then they run roughshod over those teams. And it's like, oh man, I guess those players were overrated. I guess Indiana's players were underrated. Hey, conditionally, maybe some of them were. Hey, quick time out here. Are you subscribed to the channel? It doesn't cost anything. It's free. Please do it. It helps us maintain the show at this level. That's it. That's all I got. Back to the clip. On each side of that coin, could I also present you that talent does matter a whole lot here, but so does development, and so does experience, and so does age. And I've always thought there is a glaring inefficiency just in player ratings in general, but not high school ratings. I've always wondered why in the world we rate kids out of high school and then stop when they're in college. And the next time we rate them is when they're going out for the draft. To me, I'm not passionate enough about this to do it, but like I've told Shannon before, said, hey man, if I were going to invest in manpower and resource, what I would do is I would build an entire department to put living, breathing grades on every active college football player. It's a huge undertaking. Of course it is. I think it'd be worthwhile. Here's what I think you'd see. What I think you'd see is, let's just take a random Indiana 3-star. All right, I'm speaking generically here. There are going to be exceptions on both sides of this. Let's say you got an undersized kid, comes out of Muncie, Indiana, and he doesn't get offers from Ohio State and Notre Dame, and Indiana takes him. All right, and he's a 3-star, and then he's a freshman and he doesn't play, and then he's a second-year guy and he doesn't play, third-year guy, special teams, and he's a reserve. Fourth year, he starts to get in. He's using his redshirt year, so then by his 5th year, he's a big-time player. Sometimes you get a medical. These guys that got COVID years, they're in their 6th year. You're over half a decade older. You're over half a decade removed from your high school recruiting ranking. Now, let's say you've been in a program for those 6 years that is A+ at development, A+ at culture, A+ at strength and conditioning, A+ at nutrition, A+ at everything it takes to take a former 3-star and cultivate them. What do you think that kid could be 6 years later? And then what do you think a whole group of them could be 6 years later? So what I'm trying to say is, I don't just look at the 23-year-old former 3-star and think because he's playing out of his mind that the recruiting industry missed when they ranked him. I think people need to properly understand what a recruiting ranking is. A recruiting ranking is at 17 or 18 years old, when you get spat out of high school, a talent-based measurement of who you are or who guys subjectively think you are when they're grading you. It doesn't measure you from the neck up, first off, because you can't grade kids mentally because you don't have that kind of access to them. So what are you grading? You're grading high school film, some combine type stuff if they go to camps and things of that nature. You're probably a little bit influenced by their offer sheet, and you can debate whether that has merit or not. But by and large, you're talking about a snapshot of an athletic profile of a guy when they're 17 years old. Some of these guys are 23 years old. So if I take a 23-year-old former 3-star who's done everything the right way inside the walls of a great program, and I put him up against an 18-year-old freshman 5-star, and he whips his tail, that's not automatically an indictment on the recruiting industry to me, as much as it is a reflection of what age and experience do in relation to talent when talent is raw versus a grown man. That, to me, has been Indiana football this year. And then the other thing that I would say is maybe it is the case that it takes a healthy look at how you're grading guys. But that should be happening anyway. If Indiana serves to be a wake-up call, so be it. But I always think that the recruiting industry as a whole should be evaluating itself. It should be quality controlling itself. And maybe if Indiana serves as some wake-up call, okay. It hasn't been the indictment on the recruiting industry and the star rating system and the team ranking system that I've seen a lot of people make it out to be. That's all I'm saying. I do not view it the same way that many people do. And no, I certainly don't think high school recruiting is dead. I challenge you to find me anybody that's about to build for long-term sustained success that is not first and foremost prioritizing high school recruiting. I'm not asking you, are there examples to the contrary? I'm not asking, you're going to point out Texas Tech to me, and if I had Joey McGuire on the show right now, if I had Cody Campbell on the show right now, they'd tell you, dude, we're heavily leaning into high school recruiting. Heavily leaning into it, heavily investing in it. That's what it'll always be about. I'm looking at a lot of these schools right now. The model to build a winner is still the same as it's been, just it's evolved a little bit. It is recruit and develop and then invest in your high school recruits, because that's how you build. You want guys multiple years in your system, and you recruit them out of high school, and you develop them, and hopefully they improve, and you take your money, and in a perfect world, you're doing what Notre Dame's doing right now. They hadn't taken a single kid out of the portal. It's not a poverty program, that's Notre Dame. But they hadn't taken a single kid out of the portal because they believe in their guys they have in-house right now. You don't think they're spending money at Notre Dame? Of course they are. They're spending it on the guys they have in their system. That's the model. Anybody who tells you otherwise is lying to you. The way Notre Dame's doing it right now is the envy of everyone else. They wish they hit 100%. Everyone wants to bat 1,000 on their kids they recruit out of high school. You don't think Alabama or Texas A&M would love to bring guys up 3-4 years in the same system and then just pay them instead of having to go to the portal? Of course they would. But they've swung and missed, and so the second part of the model is you supplement, or if you can, you upgrade via the portal. You don't build through the portal. No one's doing that and sustaining long-term success. Now, if you want to go bottle rocket approach and just light the fuse and watch it pop off one time, Florida State did that a couple of years ago. And then what happened to Florida State? So if you want to chase that model, be my guest. I don't think many people with a proper head on their shoulders are chasing that model.